Right now, let's welcome Wendra Lynne. We're really excited. Joining us right now from Round Rock, right outside of Austin in the state of Texas. Our guest today is the author of a beautiful rhyming picture book called The Wondrous Cloud Forest. Please welcome to the show, Wendra Lynne. Wendra, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you on. Tell us about The Wondrous Cloud Forest. This is a really beautiful book.
Well, it's about one of our Earth's most magical yet endangered places in Papua New Guinea. And I wrote the book because I wanted children and parents to be able to talk together about climate change and endangered species in a way that was optimistic and gave them some ideas about how they can also help.
How did you get interested in the cloud forest and in writing about this issue?
Well, I first was introduced to the tree kangaroos, which are the flagship species of the cloud forest at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, where I was living at the time. And they are just such adorable little animals that I fell in love with them. And I had been painting with watercolors, and so of course I had to paint them. And a friend was visiting, and some coffee spilled in my studio, and my friend, who's now my husband, said, "Have you ever tried painting with coffee?" And so I started painting with coffee, and of course saw the correlation between the tree kangaroo's beautiful coffee-colored fur. And so I had started doing these paintings and ended up at a party where I met the woman who, Lisa Daybeck. She is the founder of the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Program, which helps not just the tree kangaroos, but helps protect the whole cloud forest. And it happened to be the anniversary of their program, and so my paintings were used for gifts in the gift shop, T-shirts, etc. And then one thing led to another. I just kept imagining these beautiful little creatures and stories about them, and I wanted to share them with the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, I did the research, and so I went online and I saw what a tree kangaroo is. But I have to tell you, when we first started corresponding with each other, and I had this vision of like a full-size kangaroo jumping in the trees, and I'm like, how does that work? Can you tell us a little bit more about the tree kangaroo?
Yes. So they're miniature little tree kangaroos. They look like plush toy animals. They have very long tails that keep them balanced in the trees, and they hang down, and they're very elusive. In fact, Lisa Daybeck, she traveled to Papua New Guinea for, I think, over 8 years before actually seeing one. It's very hard to come in contact with them. Now with, I think they have critter cams, and they have new technology through Microsoft and I think National Geographic are working together so they can actually track them. And so now, with also the help of the local people that used to hunt them, that no longer need to hunt them because they have income from selling their coffee, and that's why I paint with the coffee. So back to the tree kangaroos. Sorry, I'm a very nonlinear thinker. I have to stay on track. They have very large padded feet, so they can jump very high from like 60 feet and land safely on the ground. They do leap between the trees easily. At first, when they were trying to locate them, all they would see would be like a scratch on the side of a tree bark, and they knew they were in the area because they're so elusive, and they blend right into the moss and the trees. They have that beautiful coffee color, which is the same color as the soft moss that hangs in the trees. So they, that's how they protect themselves. Yeah. I think they're quiet. So there's ways in the book, and there's at the zoos, they can help you learn more about the tree kangaroos.
Yeah. Neat stuff. They are really adorable animals. I can absolutely understand how you fell in love with them. Why do you think it's important for families to talk about climate change?
Well, I think it's important for everyone to talk about climate change personally. But I also think, just on a bigger scale, loving the planet and having a reverence for just nature connects one also more deeply to themselves. And it's one of the things that I use for meditation. And so whether or not, I mean, there's some, controversy. Some people don't think that it's man-made climate change, but whether or not it is, cultivating respect and a love for nature just broadens your life in so many ways. And we're all connected. And I think that because climate change can be so daunting, being able to talk about it and discuss ways that you can help and understand it and understand the animals is important. Communication increases our understanding, and I'm all about increasing communication and inspiring people to feel creative in their way in which they approach subjects that are, can be overwhelming, like climate change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you really kind of focus on having conversations that are positive. Because when we hear about climate change, a lot of times it's like we have 3 years to make some changes, or that's it. It's, lights out. You're looking at it in a very different way. Why is it important for you to be optimistic, especially when we're talking with our kids?
Well, that was one of the beauties about this particular situation that really struck me, was that Lisa Daybeck was studying the tree kangaroos, and she found that by connecting people, there was a solution not only for the animals that she loved, but that would bring more income to the people living there, and on a larger scale also help to protect the cloud forest and conservation, which in turn helps the whole planet. Mm-hmm. And I grew up on the West Coast. I was brought up learning about ecology. Remember the ecology sign? Mm-hmm. I don't know where that went, but I had always, as a little girl, wondered what's going to happen. As a child, you love animals, and as a child in all of us. And so it always had felt daunting to me. So when I started to see people like Lisa with these creative solutions, I felt hopeful, and I wanted to share that hope with other people. And I started to realize that everyone in their own way can contribute just by raising awareness, whether you're an artist or a musician or a writer or a biologist or an executive, whoever you are, you can create conversation and bring your perspective to the solutions for things that seem really daunting when you think about approaching it on your own.
Yeah. What kind of things can we the podcast has been heard all around the world, which is amazing, and on every continent, including Antarctica. But most of the folks who are listening to the podcast are in the United States or Canada, the United Kingdom, France. How can those of us living in the States, in Europe, what can we do that can positively affect the cloud forest in Papua New Guinea or Costa Rica or Brazil?
Well, I mentioned some of these things in the back of the book. First of all, visiting zoos, I think that people need to understand that most zoos these days, and all zoos that are part of the AZA and the WAZA, which are associations for zoos and aquariums, their main missions now is to provide protection for animals and their habitats around the world. So they're doing research and rehabilitation. And so when you visit a zoo, you're really contributing and helping raise funds for their work. Also, in Papua New Guinea specifically, as I mentioned earlier, at the zoos and online, you can find what's called use. It's initials for their conservation coffee, which is grown by the local people in Papua New Guinea in lieu of deforesting and hunting endangered species. You can also raise awareness. Like with me, I paint with the coffee, and I teach others, and I do events. So you could bake with the coffee, and you could share that with your friends and families, and educate them about the cloud forest. And so those are just a few ways.
Wow! Now you mentioned that you paint with coffee. I've certainly been part of moments where coffee is spilt on a paper tablecloth or whatever. So I know that you can certainly make a mess with coffee. I've never heard of painting with coffee. How would we start? Just grabbing a cup of coffee and a paintbrush and going at it, or is it a little bit more complicated?
Well, yeah, it's actually quite simple if you have if you've painted with watercolors before. The important part is that you need watercolor paper, because the coffee does respond really well to the watercolor paper, and making a mess, as you said, is part of the fun. And I think that, I often start with spilling a little bit and seeing where it takes me onto the paper. And then you can sprinkle the coffee, and you can use darker, richer tones if you're using some thicker, if you make your coffee very thick. And I love it because the tones are so beautiful and warm, but it's also monochromatic. So for someone like me who tends to do lots of broad thinking, it helps me focus in and just on the subject that I'm painting. And I teach watercolors and coffee painting, so you can add the coffee to your watercolors to give an overall sepia tone, which is lovely. So anyone who's interested can visit my website and talk to me about, I do private parties and introduce you to coffee painting so you can take off on your own and continue to explore it.
What a neat idea. Painting with coffee. And I'm imagining that would be just a great time to have those conversations about where did this come from? Okay, we bought the coffee at the supermarket maybe, or maybe we ordered it online, but beyond that, before it ended up in that can or that bag, it started life. Can you kind of share with us?
Another interesting thing about coffee, and it's interesting once you get on these roads of things that you're passionate about. Coffee is, I think, maybe the second or the third. It's one of the world's largest commodities that's exchanged and worldwide. And coffee is a tradition all over the world where people come together, as you were just saying, just to visit and to have conversations. And that is part of the thread that's educating people about the cloud forest, and in many places like the rainforests and where people live who are in these more rural communities, it's connecting them to people in cities and allowing everyone to work together. So, yeah, I think that it's pretty magical that coffee is the vehicle for this expression and communication.
Yeah, it really is. My beautiful wife and I visited Costa Rica and some coffee plantations in Costa Rica, and it was amazing to discover how much that beautiful country depends on coffee. It's a huge part of their economy, to the point where the government decided that, hey, we're only going to grow this one certain type of coffee because that way it's protected. I guess that the other brands other types don't damage this one crop. Really fascinating. And what a neat thing that the folks in Papua New Guinea who had been hunting the tree kangaroos made the decision to stop that and then start growing and harvesting coffee.
Yes, the people there have really become the stewards of their own land, and they have created a huge conservation area with the government and the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Program, which I met through the Woodland Park Zoo and Lisa Daybeck. They helped facilitate this, but really it's in the hands of the local people, which is just so wonderful.
And that probably makes it more effective.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Neat. I'm really excited. I know that, as you mentioned your website and the fact that you teach, and that's really neat. Can you let everybody know where they can go online to find out more about your classes and your books and all of that neat stuff?
Yes, thank you for asking. My website is by Wendra, B-Y, and my name, WENDRA.com.
Well, we've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of The Wondrous Cloud Forest, Wendra Lynne. Wendra, thank you so much for being part of our show today.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Laura Shermer, celebrating Kita and the magic paint. Hey, want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Patty Donnelly. Be sure to check out The Vanishing Lake. Also, Wendra Lynne. Be sure to check out The Wondrous Cloud Forest. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Justina Thompson, Helen Fraser. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to join together to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Thank you so much for helping your children get through this crazy past 16 months of pandemic lockdown. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.